Welcome to episode 6 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on April 19th, 2019. Today I'd like to talk to you about my trip to England and a few yarn shops I was able to visit while I was there. I'll also talk about the projects I finished since I last spoke to you. And not only will I announce the giveaway winner, I'll be announcing another giveaway. All that plus some music to knit by. I appreciate all of you who made your introductions on the Ravelry board. It's been so nice to see where everyone is from and to find so many connections beyond knitting. If you are on Ravelry and haven't had a chance to look for the group yet, you can find it at I Thought I Knew How podcast. There are 34 people on the group so far, which is quite good given that it's only existed for about a month. If you're not on the group yet, go hop in and introduce yourself on the intro thread. I'm not going to make you wait until the end of the podcast to find out who won the giveaway. A reminder that the giveaway this time was a hank of Selkie Sport from Dragonfly Fibers in their Denali colorway and 2 pairs of Ginger DPNs from Knitter's Pride. If you've been following me on Instagram, you've seen photos of the Cold Sand Cowl by Melanie Rice that I've been knitting with a hank of the Selkie Sport that they sent for me. It's really been a joy to work with, especially considering that I started using it on 2 other projects before it finally told me that it wanted to become a Cold Sand Cowl. So I said okay and got to work on it, and we're all much happier now. Even though it had been knit and frogged back twice, it was still in great shape as I started working with it again. It would work up well for socks, I think, or for shawls, or even a lightweight cardigan. Do visit dragonflyfibers.com and take a look at their yarns. They are lovely to behold. As of recording, there are 264 entries in the contest. I asked Siri to pick a number between 1 and 264, and Siri picked 62. And the winner is Euphistic81. Congratulations. Your winning entry was through Instagram, so I'll reach out to you there on the day this episode is released and get your contact info so I can mail you your prize. I'm not sure where Euphistic81 is from because her account is set to private, but this contest was open to everyone, so perhaps this yarn is headed across town or across the world. I'll have to talk to her and find out. That reminds me real quick. When people follow me on Instagram, I don't follow them back if their account is private. I assume that they're keeping it private for a reason. So if you have a private account and wouldn't mind a follow back, just send me a message and let me know. Also, if I don't follow you back, please don't take offense. I'm trying to compartmentalize my social media usage, and Instagram is where I do all my knitting related stuff. So if you follow me, I usually only follow back if there's evidence of knitting going on. But that's not a commentary on how interesting I may find your feed otherwise. This is just what helps me keep my social media stuff manageable. Anyway, don't despair, listeners, if you're not Euphistic81, because I have another giveaway to announce at the end of this episode. Let's take a quick break. I know it's early in the episode, but we're going to be talking a lot about English yarn in a minute here. I'm going to play some music for you so I can regroup real quick and grab the yarn I got in England. I'm looking forward to telling you about the local yarn stores I was able to visit and the yarny goodness I came home with. In honor of the recent trip with my vintage-loving daughter, the songs this episode will be a couple of old dance hall songs. I hope you find them as delightful as I did. The first is a follow-up to a song called Has Anybody Here Seen Kelly? About a woman who travels to London with her boyfriend Kelly from the Isle of Man. They get separated in Piccadilly and no one can find him, and it's heavily implied that he's given her the slip to go visit the pub. This song I'm going to play for you is called They Can't Find Kelly. The singer is bemoaning the fact that British scientists seem to be able to find anything they put their mind to other than Kelly. This version of the song is by Billy Merson and is available at the Free Music Archive.
Now in these scientific days, it seems to be the latest craze to make some great discovery with which to make a stir. Scientists each day will try to solve some problem in the sky to stop the seas from rolling or to battle with the air. They've lately solved some problems which are absolutely great, and in this chorus some of them I'm going to relate. Cook and Peary found the pole if their reports are true. Another man has also found what radium can do. To fly around up in the air, they've also found a plan, but they can't find Kelly from the Isle of Man. Cook and Peary found the pole if their reports are true. Another man has also found what radium can do. To fly around up in the air, they've also found a plan. They can't find Kelly from the Isle of Man. Good gracious me, and all these scientists, all these great detectives and great explorers, and they can't find Kelly. Why, they couldn't find how Mrs. Brown's baby caught the measles. Fancy a little fellow in the Isle of Man baffling all these people and putting the whole world in mystery. It's ridiculous, you know. To find him they are trying hard, while all the force from Scotland Yard are searching all the country through in hopes to bring him back. There's no mistake, he takes the cake, for Sherlock Holmes and Sexton Blake have had a dozen bloodhounds and for weeks been on his track. A big reward is offered to who finds the missing link. And certainly it's humorous when you only pause to think that Cook and Peary found the pole if their reports are true. Another man has also found what radium can do. To fly around up in the air, they've also found the plan. They can't find Kelly from the Isle of Man. I should think they couldn't find him. I'll bet they haven't searched all the public houses. Soon find him then, eh? My word, I'll bet. They can't find Kelly from the Isle of Man.
As I said in the last podcast, my daughter and I were headed over to England for a week. We usually do a big family trip together once a year, but we ended up splitting the kids between us so we could take them on trips that catered to their personal interests. Abby, my youngest, is hoping to work in fashion someday. So we went to London to see the Dior Designer of Dreams exhibit that is at the Victoria and Albert Museum. It follows his career in fashion and the work of the Dior fashion house through their dresses and video clips. It is a stunning exhibit. Oddly enough, my favorite room was the room of muslin mock-ups of the different dresses. It was just fascinating to see them all made up in muslin and marked with the seamstress's notes. So we saw that, and we were also able to see an exhibit that hadn't officially opened yet of Mary Quant's work. Quant is famous for creating the look of the 60s, from the mini skirt to pinafores to vinyl accessories. We had no idea the exhibit was there, and we were able to get in and see it before we left. One thing I learned from that particular exhibit was that Quant designed knitted dress patterns and sweater patterns for Patton's yarn, and the patterns can still be had by searching on Etsy. There's a few people who have found the old patterns and typed them up into PDF format and can email them to you. I'm going to try to find one to knit myself because the whole time I was at the exhibit, I was admiring her work, but I also hate sewing so much. But I do love the idea of knitting one of her designs. The Victoria and Albert also just happens to have an impressive collection of fashion on regular display, including a knitted swimming suit. Can I just say that I am so glad to live in a time when I don't have to swim in a suit knit tightly in sport weight wool. I really am happy to have missed that era. We were able to get to the Fashion and Textile Museum as well, which had its own exhibit of Mary Quant designs going on. And we made it over to Bath to visit the Fashion Museum, which was really interesting. They have a series of 100 different outfits that takes you through something like 500 years of fashion. And so you really get to see the progress of fashion over that time period. They also had a side exhibit of dresses worn by royal women of the last 150 years or so that was just gorgeous to be able to see the dresses up close. I am not as obsessively interested in fashion as my daughter is, but I will say I learned something about garment design and construction at each of the exhibits that has influenced how I think about knitwear. So if you have the opportunity to visit any of these sites, you should do it. But of course, I wasn't going to miss the chance to visit some yarn shops and pick up some local wool while I was there. The first store we visited was the Village Haberdashery. It's a bit of a ways from the tourist center of London, and it took us a few transfers on the underground to get to it, but it's a short walk once you come up to the surface again. It's up on the second floor of the building, so keep your head up as you approach the address. The Village Haberdashery is a general craft store that focuses mainly on fabric and yarn crafts, but has a great selection of paper craft and needlepoint supplies as well. If you're someone who enjoys crafting in general and would like to pick up some supply souvenirs on your travels, this would be a great store for you to visit. The selection isn't huge, but what they do have is a nice blend of stylish and quirky items with enough workhorse supplies to pull it all together. I poked around on their wall of wool for a while before I settled on 3 hanks of Wool Local from Erica Knight. 2 hanks are in the Kathy colorway, which is a darkish gray, and the other is Bennett, which is a grayish blue. The yarn is labeled as a 4-ply, but in British terminology, that means it's a sport weight yarn for us in the US. It's actually spun up with 2 plies in the sense that we use that word in America, meaning 2 strands of yarn spun together. And for those of you listening in Australia, it's a 5-ply yarn. I have Googled my fingers to the bone, but I cannot find any information to explain why there are so many systems for describing the thickness of yarn. I assume it has to do with some early manufacturing processes. But if anyone knows why we don't all use the same designations for yarn, please let me know because I really am curious about this. Anyway, I'm digressing. Wool Local is a blend of blue-faced Leicester and Massam. These are both long wools with a gentle luster to them. The yarn itself has a bit of loftiness to it and already has a bit of halo in the hank. The sheep are raised and the wool processed all within 50 miles, hence the name Wool Local. My intention is to knit a colorwork scarf of some sort with this for my husband. Massam sometimes isn't so soft, but this blend is quite nice. There's no prickiness to it at all when I hold it against my neck, so I think it will work well as a scarf. The next shop we visited was Wool in Bath. Now, I had asked my alumni knitting group before I left which store I should visit while I was in England if I only have time to hit one. And several people told me Wool was the shop to visit. And I have to say, of the 3 shops, this one really was my favorite. It's tucked away down a lane in Bath, almost directly across from a deceptively large fabric shop that my daughter enjoyed popping into for a while. If you're not already following Wool Bath on Instagram, you should be. Laura, the store's owner, is just a delightful person, and her Instagram stories are my favorite. It's so funny because she apologizes up and down for them if you bring them up, but I find them charming. Anyway, I had heard about the Innocence Big Knit project by following Laura, so that's where I turned in all the hats I had made. I'm proud to say I met my goal to knit 5 hats a day and turned in 115 hats knit by myself and an additional 2 crocheted owl hats sent to me by Stephanie Girl from Chicago. It truly cleaned out all of my scrap yarn. I think I have a half of a skein of 1 ball left. Everything else went into the hats perfectly, and I ran out as my time was up. If you'd like to know more about the project, check out thebignit.co.uk. If you're in the UK or you're headed there, you have until July to turn in the tiny hats, and every hat earns 25 pence for the local branch of Age UK. I know some people out there are going to think I'm silly for having knit so many tiny hats when I could have knit actual hats to donate to actual people. But I have been saving all my scraps of yarn longer than a yard for years now, and I didn't have enough of the same type of yarn in the same color family to make more than a hat or 2. And even still, had I taken the complementary scraps and knit them into real hats, they'd have been a jumble of bumps from all the weaving in. I think if you're going to make an actual hat for an actual person to wear, even as a donation, it should be a lovely thing and not a scrappy mishmash. So I was really pleased to have found a way to use up all those scrappity bits to do some good. If you're also a hoarder of scrappity bits, this would be a fine time to dig them out and put them to good use. But I digress again. Wool focuses on yarn and has 3 walls full of the lovely stuff, plus buttons and patterns and everything else you'd need for your yarny workings. Plus there is Toby, the sweetest shop dog I have ever encountered, who sits in pride of place, ready to greet visitors as they come in the door. I think my daughter spent about 90% of the time we were there just sitting next to Toby and giving him love. A great deal of the stock at Wool is British yarn, so I had a hard time deciding what to get. Finally, I settled on a sweater's worth of blue-faced Leicester wool and a DK weight. That's an 8-ply for the Australian listeners. The colors are Cymbeline, which is a darkish gray, and Gordon, which is a deep red. And without even realizing it, I'd chosen more yarn from Erica Knight. These are her British Blue 100 line. I clearly know what I like. What can I say? The British Blue 100 is made up of 3 plies and the twist is tighter than the Wool Local. The color of the British Blue is more consistent and solid than the Wool Local, which has some subtle color variation to it. I'm guessing because the fiber from the different breeds in the blend from Wool Local took up the dye to different degrees. The British Blue is also comfortable against the skin and has a slight sheen to it that, I don't know, it just makes me think that it's ready to be knit. I know that makes no sense, but I just look at it and it's just like, please work with me. I'm the perfect yarn. It's 100% blue-faced Leicester, hence the name, British Blue 100. Sadly, we couldn't linger at Wool for long because we had to rush for our train back to London, but I do wish we'd had more time there to just be in the shop and poke around some more and give Toby some extra pats. There's a very comfortable feeling to the shop. Do be sure to visit if you can. Now, I thought I was done with my yarn shopping at that point, but the day before we were meant to leave, I decided to take my daughter to Liberty London so she could get some of the famous Liberty fabric. I knew Liberty from their fabric line. I honestly had no idea that they were also a flagship store for Rouen yarns. The fabric department leads right into the haberdashery area, and about half of that area is Rouen. I took the opportunity to touch it all while I had the chance. It actually was a bit of a walk down memory lane as I saw yarns I'd used to knit gifts for friends in the past. You know how there are workhorse yarns that you can use for very practical, everyday things that will get a lot of wear, and then there are the luxury yarns that you use for small projects or special projects or just in a small amount to pep up a project knit mainly in a workhorse yarn. Sometimes when I think of luxury yarn, I think of something coming from an independent dyer. And sometimes I would classify something as a luxury yarn because it's made from a rare fiber. But I feel like Rouen is a luxury workhorse yarn. They are not going to take the time to tell you the breeds that went into making their wools. There doesn't tend to be anything flashy about their yarn line. The colors tend to be solids or just a standard gradation or variation, but the quality feels like it's just that much nicer than some of the other standard workhorse yarns out there. Of course, the price tag matches that increase in quality, but it's nice to have the option to work with a yarn that's widely available, that you can just count on to produce extra lovely results. I ended up grabbing a few balls of cashmere tweed in the night colorway and plan to work them up into some sort of glove or mitten when it starts to get cold again. It's interesting that the cashmere tweed, it's very soft to the touch, but when I hold it against my neck, I get I'm doing it right now. Sorry. It doesn't happen every time, but every now and then I do get a little prickle from this. It's 80% wool and 20% cashmere, and it comes in 96 yard balls. I got a couple. I figured one for each hand would be plenty, but every now and then I get a little prickle from it, which is weird because it does feel so soft to the touch, but it doesn't seem to affect my wrist area at all. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with my plan to use it as some sort of mitten or glove or fingerless gloves or something like that. So that's what I came home with from England. I took over almost as much in tiny hats as what I brought home with me, so I don't feel too badly about all the yarn I brought back. I have brought balance to the stash. Normally, I would have a little ad here, but I have been so busy I wasn't able to line one up. So if you'd like to support the show, go back to the show notes for other episodes and use the link to visit Drops for your laundry detergent, or try out Honey to find savings at online retailers. Maybe make a donation to the Shetland MRI scanner appeal. And any link to a book or product that takes you to Amazon will provide a little kickback to the show at no cost to you. While I have your ear, I'll make one more appeal for thebignit.co.uk. It's a great way to use your collection of tiny scraps to do something good for the elderly. Now back to the show. I have nothing to report about the Master Knitter program. Between the trip and trying to knit 5 tiny hats a day, I had very little time for anything else. However, I did decide I needed to buy some more yarn for the project. I went over to Margies Yarn Crafts in search of more Cascade 220 to knit the seed stitch scarf. If you didn't hear the last episode, I need to practice my tension for the seed stitch swatch, and I decided to just stop trying to knit the swatch and get my practice in by knitting a scarf. I wanted to use the same yarn I've been using for the swatches, so I picked up a scarf's worth for that. While I was there, I checked the clearance area, and Margie just happened to have several hanks of 220 in a sort of mossy brown color that had been marked down 50%. So I picked some of those up too, because I had realized that knitting and reknitting the swatches was destroying my yarn. So I needed some 220 to use to practice with. And then when I have the skill down, I could use my natural colored 220 to finish the final swatch. So that's my game plan going forward. I have kind of a ooky colored yarn to do my practice on, and then I can switch to the natural colored yarn when I know what I'm doing. As soon as I finish the Cold Sands cowl, I'm going to cast on for the seed stitch scarf, and then progress on the Master Knitter program will continue. As far as finishing things, I haven't actually finished a whole lot since the last episode. I work as a freelance editor for bloggers and people who want to self-publish books. I don't advertise, I just rely on word of mouth from my clients because I see this as a very small endeavor that will grow naturally while I'm still homeschooling my kids, and as they need me less, the business will grow more and the demands on my time will sort of level out between the two. Every now and then, though, a book project comes my way and I'm steadily busy for several weeks, but typically my workload is just an hour or two here or there. Well, I got back from the trip and 2 book projects that I had been told were in the works arrived in my inbox on the same day, and then one of the authors said the following day, no, wait, I have this other project I need you to do first. So I went from a part-time freelance job that maybe got me 5 or 10 hours a month to 3 books I need to do all at the same time. So I have been slammed. I've been trying to fit the knitting in around my editing time, but I am not getting tons done at the moment. I did finally finish my second attempt at the Sensilla cowl by Shireen Nadir. This is the cowl I knit before, where I did not check the gauge because the pattern said gauge is unimportant, and then that was a lie. Because I knit so tightly that it ended up, instead of draping sort of down on my shoulders and around my neck, it just stands at attention. So with this, the second try, I swatched to find a drape that I liked with the yarn that I had. And then I just followed the instructions and knit it to the dimensions rather than following the instructions row by row. I'm happy to report that completely worked. It has a nice drape to it. It's a proper size. I have to do the final grafting of the last 3 stitches to the first 3 stitches on the I-cord bind off, and that's it. And then I'll block it and post some pictures. So I finished that on the plane, and I didn't have the needle with me to do the grafting. So that's why, and then I got home and it's just been sitting in the bag, but I will take care of that this weekend and then get it blocked. A few days after that, I finished the Nigiri wrist warmers by Yumiko Sakurai. I made them long enough to extend to the elbow because I'm always cold. I believe the original pattern called for you to make them like 6 or 8 inches long before you cross them at the wrist, but I just kept going to make sure that they would go all the way to my elbow. It's a very simple design and makes for good TV knitting. It's basically 2x2 rib the entire time until you get to the hand portion where you have 2 of the knit ribs cross each other and then continue straight up, and you have to deal with the thumb area. But they're very easy patterns, and it's, quick candy knitting. You get good results, quick results because it's bulky, and they look very elegant, I think. My only bit of sadness about these mitts is that despite being the same color and the same dye lot of Koigu bulky, the colors of one hank are noticeably darker than the other. Now, I had 2 hanks, and so I used one for one arm and one for the other arm. So there's not an issue of the differences in color sitting right next to each other on the same arm. And I figure my arms are far enough away that I think you'd have to really be looking to notice the difference, but I do wish the colors had been more consistent between these hanks. I'm going to have to be more careful when I pick Koigu in the future. Pictures of these should go up, hopefully in the show notes when I'm able to put the show up. I think I have one more end. I'm saying I finished these, but really I do have to weave in an end or 2 on these projects. True confessions. Let's listen to one more song before we do the final push to the end. I have another little dance hall number for you. This one is sung by Flory Ford and is called Cabages, Cabines, and Carottes. You can take this song a couple of ways. Either Flory just loves gardening, or she's got a sense of optimism that helps her focus on the beauty of what she has. Either way you take it, it's got a catchy chorus, and I've been singing it to myself since I found the song.
About roses and songs about violets blue. You've had lots of songs about chrysanthemums and songs about daffodils too. But I've got a flower song that you shouldn't miss. They're my favorite flowers, and the chorus is this. Cabages, cabines and carottes, carottes and cabines and cabages, sweetest of flowers that I love so. I love to sit there and watch them grow. Some people like rhododendrons and some forget-me-not. But I'd rather have a nice plate of cabbage with cabbages, cabines and carottes. The heart of a rose some may fancy, but give me the heart of the sheep. Stuffed with tomatoes, potatoes and sprouts, and onions that sing you to sleep. The roses of Picardy others may please, but I'd rather pick some nice stuff and green tea. With cabbages, cabines and carottes, carottes and cabines and cabbages, sweetest of flowers that I love so. I love to sit there and watch them grow. Some people like rhododendrons and some forget-me-not. But I'd rather have a nice plate of cabbages with cabbages, cabines and carottes, rock, rock.
A few more things before I go. First, there are a couple of events coming up on April 27th, which is the Saturday after this episode will launch. The first is Local Yarn Store Day, which is a worldwide event sponsored by the National Needle Arts Association. This is an opportunity for all of us fiber crafters to show our local brick and mortar yarn stores a little extra love and support. Participating yarn shops may have special products and events in the shop, so check www.localyarnstoreday.com for the participating retailers link and see if your local yarn store is joining in. Now, I say that this is officially sponsored by TNNA, which is an American-based needle arts association. However, I've seen all over the world different yarn stores saying that they're participating. I'm not sure if yarn stores outside of the U.S. are listed on the TNNA website, so maybe just check with your local yarn store owner and confirm with them. I know my most local yarn store is not participating officially. However, even if your local yarn store isn't an official participant, try to get in and give them a little extra support that day. If you are in the area of Central Connecticut, also on April 27th, the 110th Connecticut Sheep, Wool, and Fiber Festival will be taking place in Vernon, Connecticut from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Admission is $10 per carload of people. Connecticut Sheep, Wool, and Fiber Festival is run by the Connecticut Sheep Breeders Association to promote sheep raising in Connecticut. There will be a fleece sale, historical reenactors, a spinning competition, and demonstrations of weaving, crochet, and bobbin lace. You'll be able to watch shearing and fleece skirting as well. We're planning to attend as a family, and if you happen to see me there, be sure to say hi. I'd love to meet you. If you need to know who to look for, I have some photos on my Instagram feed, though I currently need a haircut and may not have time to get one before then, so look for a scruffier version of myself. Second, I'm going to offer a new giveaway. I saw some lovely project bags on Etsy the other day by a maker called Little Comforts A to Z. That's Little Comforts A-T-O-Z. They are her Japanese knot bags. It's a very basic all-fabric tote with one handle longer than the other. And when you need to close the bag, you just pass the longer handle through the shorter one, and that holds the bag closed. And you can use the longer handle to hold onto the bag. If you want, you can knit with the yarn in the closed bag and hang it from your arm while you knit and just pull on the strand of yarn as you need more. So it's very handy if you are someone who likes to knit while you're walking around or running errands and you want to keep your ball of yarn safe. I ended up ordering one for each of my daughters to serve as their Easter baskets this year. We had to leave their childhood Easter baskets behind in the Philippines because we didn't have space in the shipping container. And they are both teenagers now, and I thought they'd appreciate something a little more grown up. Anyway, Susan, the woman behind Little Comforts A to Z, very kindly sent an extra bag to offer as a giveaway on the podcast. She doesn't have a social media presence, so you'll have to hop over to her store on Etsy and take a look. I'll put a link in the show notes. She has a lovely rose one with dragonflies on the reverse that I'm eyeing right now. You might get it before I do, though. I just bought knitting bags. I have to show some restraint. Again, it's Little Comforts A to Z. I'll put a picture of the actual bag for the giveaway in the show notes at ithoughtIknewhow.familypodcast.com and on Instagram. This bag is reversible. It has cactus on one side and alpaca on the other. It's super cute, and it can be yours if you win. Not only that, but because of the alpaca theme, I decided to throw in a hank of hand-spun alpaca yarn that I picked up in Peru a few years ago. It is quite a large hank. Because I bought it from a local spinner who was just selling her yarns unlabeled, I have no idea exactly how many yards there are in the hank, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was over 400. I was told it's 100% alpaca, which I believe based on the color and the feel and the lack of luster. Alpaca is very soft, but it does not have the luster that wool does. But I love it anyway. Oh my gosh, I love alpaca so much. It's a lovely camel color. I would place it as sport to DK weight because it's hand spun. There's some variation. And as I said, it comes with no label. I really like it, but I got quite a bit of hand spun while I was there, so I'm happily passing this hank along to a lucky listener. Also, I'll throw in a set of stitch markers. I used to have a small home-based business making them before we moved to the Philippines, and I have the last chunk of inventory left. And really, anyone who wins any giveaway from me is going to get a set of stitch markers too until they are all gone. I can only use so many stitch markers myself, so I figure I'll spread the love. If you are a member of the Ravelry group or you follow me on Instagram, you are already entered in the contest. If you haven't joined the group or followed me on Instagram, do it, and that will get you one entry for each of those actions. Another way you can enter is to find the post about the giveaway on my Instagram feed and repost it either to your feed or to your stories. Be sure to tag I Thought I Knew How so I can keep track of these entries that are made this way. And the last way you could enter is, I figured between my England report and the Peruvian yarn, this is a pretty travel-heavy episode, so let's run with that. Find the thread for this episode on the Ravelry group and tell me one of two things. Either where you'd most like to visit for the sake of knitting, or someplace you've already visited related to knitting that you would recommend to others. So, to sum all of this up, join the Ravelry group, follow me on Instagram if you haven't already, repost the giveaway post on Instagram either to your stories or feed, and don't forget to tag me, and leave a comment about knitting-related travel on the episode 6 thread in the Ravelry group. Do all of these things and you'll have 4 entries in the contest. There is no essay in this episode. I have been too busy trying to play catch up. I'm hoping life will settle down a little before the next episode and I can return to the normal format. But thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you would like to contact me, you can email me at ann@familypodcasts.com. That's Ann with an E at familypodcasts.com. I'm on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube as I Thought I Knew How. If it's a place that allows you to put spaces between the words, then there are spaces between the words. Otherwise, it's all one word. The Facebook and Ravelry groups are both called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. I'm on Twitter as @ThoughtIKnewHow. I do have a website for the show at IThoughtIKnewHow.familypodcasts.com. There you will find the show notes for each episode, including links to products I've mentioned and ways to support the show. Every now and then I post a blog post there too. Remember, you can help support the show by visiting any of the previous sponsors from the first 5 episodes. I'll hopefully get myself back in proper order before the next episode. In the meantime, thank you for your support. If you are a musician or know one and would like to have a song featured on the program, drop me an email and point me to where I can hear your music. You need to be the copyright holder to be able to grant permission, so please keep that in mind. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.